Hey guys.
Hi guys.
Welcome to Trail Talk. We are here to teach you today about sod houses. Mary and I are going to be wearing our masks
We are
today.
masked up.
I'm going to adjust this just a smidge there.
Yes, there we go.
Okay. We're masked up because we are saying no to COVID-19 today. But we're saying yes to sod houses. So we oh, hi, someone's watching us already. I hope that's a friend.
It's got to be a friend.
Got to be a friend. Yeah, we're glad you're watching. And we are super glad for everybody who's watching, even if you're not watching it live, if you're watching it at a later time. So you may or may not realize that sod houses
It's a big part of our history.
a big part of the history of everyone who I'm clouding up, of people who've moved here to the Great Plains area, actually even prior to the land run.
Exactly.
People came in larger numbers during the land run, but even before that, when people were moving, one of the things I read said that they called the sod houses or the bricks Nebraska somethings. What was it? I thought it was a funny way
Terminology.
a funny term for what they called the bricks they used to make the sod bricks. Oh well, I'll find it.
We'll find it.
And so, but that just to say that sod houses were built all through the Great Plains, from Texas all the way up in the United States, all the way up to North Dakota.
That's right.
Because that was the
So what they did, it's how they lived off the land.
right.
They made their houses from
Right,
the land.
exactly. And it required using the materials that were available to them. And people who built these sod houses were not necessarily home builders.
No, but they were survivors.
Yes.
They were intuitive, or not intuitive, but they were ingenious in the way of thinking that, hey, we're going to use the things that are around us, so why
Right.
not use,
Right.
and it was,
And I mean, imagine coming from a place where the only homes you'd ever seen were wood and brick. And there are no bricks. There's not even the right
There's no
kind of
trees.
clay to make bricks. There are no trees or not enough to build houses. So they had to become just very creative. And they were the most resourceful people, I think, you can imagine.
and they were, we'll talk more about it, but they were not economical because they really didn't have any heating and cooling.
Yeah.
But they were warm. They were kept you cool. So
Yeah,
resourceful.
they were efficient.
Efficient.
They were
That's a good
very
word.
efficient houses.
That's good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were. So, but just kind of starting out, here's a pretty typical sod house. I want you to know, first thing I noticed when I looked at this picture, there's not a single tree. Not a tree anywhere in this picture. I can see that there's a little bit of wood on this sod house. So they either paid probably a good amount of money to get
They
that
would've had
wood,
to, yeah.
especially look at around this well here. That's been put through a sawmill. So that wood has been probably
Some
shipped
cost.
in from somewhere.
Right.
And then they also, it appears to me that there's actually a wooden door frame, which leans toward an actual wooden door
Right.
being built on this house. But this just gives you an idea of the kids didn't have a lot of shade trees to play under.
No, it looks like she maybe has a little doll or something she's playing with.
Yeah, and the areas that they chose to build their houses, they would just go in and cut the sod out of that area. So there would be the flat area for the house, and then there's also going to be a surrounding area of dirt to act as a fire break. Because sod houses didn't necessarily burn because of how much dirt on them. But a wildfire could certainly, if you had any wood on your house at all,
It wouldn't take much to
Yeah,
blow.
it wouldn't take much. So anyway, that was kind of their way of doing things. So we have this video. This is put out by this studies. I think it's like
Studies
the
Weekly?
Weekly, yeah. And it's about sod houses. And I'm just going to play that and let you guys listen. It's got a lot of really good information, and then we'll come back and talk about things a little more closely. But it's just a couple of minutes long. So let me start that video.
Pioneers who wanted to settle in the western prairies needed a place to live. The homes they left in the eastern United States were most likely made of wood. Forests were plentiful in the east, and wood was easy to come by. Some homes were built of bricks, which were made from the clay soil found in the east. But the prairie where the settlers had chosen to live because of the wide open spaces where they could plant crops and raise livestock didn't have forests or clay pits. What the prairie did have was miles and miles of thick, dense prairie grass. Prairie grass, or sod, had a tangled root mass that grew down a few inches into the soil. To plant crops in the rich, fertile prairie soil, sod had to be broken up. This is how the prairie farmers got the name sodbusters. The pioneers found that if they cut the thick sod into large chunks around 2 feet long, 16 inches wide, and 4 inches thick, they could stack it like bricks and build homes. These were called sod houses. For settlers needing a place to live that could be built quickly, sod houses were the answer. Sod houses could have doors and windows just like any home, and some had wooden roofs. A sod house could stay cool in the summer and warm in the winter. They were a good option for shelter until the farmer could afford a home made of wood. Sod homes had drawbacks, though. Insects, mice, and snakes liked to make their home in the sod, too. People who lived in sod houses had to deal with these unwanted residents often. Also, heavy spring rains could cause a sod house to leak if the roof were made of sod. For pioneers settling the prairie and starting a new life, a sod house was a good option for shelter until something else could be built. But some pioneers built their sod houses to last and chose to live in them permanently. Either way, the sod house helped to settle the western frontier.
Okay, so is it fixed? Okay, so we got the message that this is why people quit watching, I'm sure. It's because they couldn't see us. I'm guessing you can hear us. Okay,
What is that?
try it. I don't know. We're going to try something and see if this will.
No.
No, that didn't do what we wanted it to. I don't understand why flipping the camera didn't work, though.
That just flipped it back to,
What does this do?
I don't know.
Pull it up on your phone and see what you see. Okay, we're going to keep talking. Kay Bowling Smith, just hang on. We'll see. Oh, there we go. What does that say? Broadcast a moment. Masks. No, I don't think that's it. I don't know. I don't understand why.
Can you see us?
We can see you, it's just everything on the screen is mirrored. so
Oh,
it's
they can see
backwards.
us.
Oh, you can see
Yeah.
us. It's just
Oh,
backwards. Okay.
well then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's okay. We
Yeah.
were afraid that you couldn't see anything, so that was.
Yeah.
So disregard the fact that the letters are.
It says
backwards.
Studies Weekly,
Yeah.
America's new textbook.
Work on your backwards reading skills today while you're watching Trail Talk. I've got my ear.
Okay,
my
thank
elf
you,
ears.
Phyllis.
All right. Thank you. Okay, thanks, Phyllis. Okay, so these houses were built out in the part of the United States where people were moving. The video told us about, the brick and the wood and all that kind of stuff. And then they come out here, and that's where the name Sodbusters come from. I didn't really realize that until I started learning about sod houses, that's why they called people Sodbusters. But, it makes so much sense, doesn't it, how they had to break up the land
Bust
to...
in the sod.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Now, the prairie grass, some of the information I studied talked about how tall
Yeah.
the prairie grass could
Some
get.
people were worried about losing their children.
Yeah, that
That's
their
how
kids.
tall.
They said it could get 6 feet tall.
Yeah. Can
6
you
feet.
imagine?
No, I cannot. I thought that was just crazy.
Put bells on your kids so
Yeah.
you can go find them later.
So you can- yeah.
Like one of those bicycle
A big
flags.
flag thing up there. So they would choose an area where they wanted to build their house, and I thought this was interesting. It takes about 1 acre of sod to build one house. That's about 16 by 18 or 20 feet, and then with walls about 7.5 feet tall.
Right.
It takes about 1 acre. So to put that in, I mean, a lot of us kind of have an idea of what an acre is, but about 1 1/3 of football field is equal to an acre.
Okay.
So that kind of gives you an idea. It's actually 1.32 football fields equals 1 acre of land. So, you know, if you're just kind of wondering.
Trying to picture
yeah,
how much
Yeah,
space
I always
that
like to have something I'm more.
to reference.
Yeah, to reference. You know, it just kind of helps me
Mhm.
in my head get that. But they would cut long strips. They would take, you know, they just had an animal pulling a single bladed plow
Plow.
of some sort,
To cut down
cut through.
and they would only
These-
cut the sod they were going to use that day, right?
Yes, yes. If you cut more than that, the dirt would dry out, and then you would not be able to stack the sod bricks on top of each other. So they'd cut those long strips, and then they'd come back and cut bricks that were a couple of feet long, and
then stack
they were
them.
about 16 inches wide, something like that. And then they would stack them. But this is one of the things that I find most interesting. They stacked them upside down. So the grass was down and then the dirt was up. And they would go up and then they would lay them cross, you know, like this to make it extra sturdy. But as long as the dirt was not dried out, the grass roots would grow and would actually grow up through all of those bricks.
So it would make it even more sturdy.
Yes.
Like mortar.
Yes.
You would have to use mortar.
It would. It actually held all of those together. I just find that to be so interesting that the grass roots just kept growing
Continue
like
to
that.
grow.
I'm really catching my elf ears as I'm looking at myself today.
You gotta get a profile.
Yeah.
Just go with the profile.
Yeah. So despite the fact that trees were not plentiful, they still used trees to an extent. You know, they would put some kind of boards to brace the area where the door was going to be, where the windows might be. Typically, there was one centrally located door on one wall,
On the front of the house.
and then a couple of windows, one on either. Ooh, 3D, one on either side of the door. But for the roof, I always find the roof to be so tricky. And from what I read, it was the most difficult part to get right.
Right, yeah.
Because they would use cedar poles. Now, I tried to imagine how you get a cedar pole around here. Does that mean you go cut down a cedar tree and then strip all those
All the bark
branches
and branches.
off of a cedar tree? I mean, maybe somebody knows, maybe someone who's watching knows, and you could like give us a tip about that, because I don't.
That would take some work.
It would take a lot of work. Yeah, a whole lot of work. So I don't know what they
How they
did
would do
exactly, but I found that to be pretty interesting. But they would put these poles, one on either end, and then run one across the top.
Kind of a support.
Yeah, to give it kind of a frame, and then lay branches. Sometimes they would find board, but most of the time they would put branches, tree branches, which,
Again, trees.
yeah, and it just doesn't seem very, like a great way to protect yourself from what's going to come through. I don't know. It's just me, just thinking out loud here. But then they would put those branches, and then they would put sod. Literally, they would cover that in sod. So, is anyone else picturing what's falling through the
I
tree
am.
branches?
I am. It's, yeah.
Yeah, it's just a mess.
Yeah.
Um,
Dirt.
Yeah. So
Animals,
it was
bugs.
pretty common to put muslin some fabric across up underneath to catch things so they didn't fall
in their food and on them. Yeah.
whenever they slept. You know, these were, in the beginning, they were one-room houses. So everything was happening in one room. The floor, I mean, you slept on the floor, you know, unless I did see where sometimes they would actually build the table and the bed right into the side of the wall.
Well, yeah.
So, you know, I don't know.
But still, if stuff's falling, it's falling on you unless
Yeah.
you have that up there to protect you.
Yeah. You know, building it into the wall, that kind of, I don't know, it just kind of freaked me out thinking about that. But then I remembered that a lot of people would actually scrape those walls and plaster or wallpaper with wallpaper or newspaper so that the inside of the walls looked more like a regular house.
Right,
Like what
it wasn't
they were
just
more
dirt and
accustomed
solid.
to.
And,
Yeah.
Right.
Just I mean, what a rough way to live.
well, but back then, they didn't know any different,
Well,
really, comparatively speaking, you know.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
still,
That's
yeah.
true. And, you know, even before they built a sod house, though, all they had with them was what they could put in their wagons. So they would either sleep under the canvas cover of the wagon or in a canvas tent. Neither of those are going to stand up to the fierce Oklahoma winds, rain, tornadoes. I mean, come on.
Yeah. You know, if you live here, you've seen all of it.
Right. And so they would go and make a dugout first, which is literally just digging a hole
Out of the earth.
out of the ground or out of the side of a hill. It was warmer and it was a little more protective. Yeah. But it, you know, that was the first. And then when they would build their soddy, they would build it out over the hole or out from the hill and just kind of add on, and that would become kind of a storage area. So again, they were just so resourceful. They didn't waste even the holes that they dug.
Right.
That everything,
They would still use that.
everything was used. So because there wasn't a lot of wood, this is something whenever we teach this lesson to the kids that always gets a lot of laughs, is what they really used for fuel. And when I'm talking like fuel for their wood stove or their stove, their
Heating.
fireplace, whatever, you know, they had to cook still. So this,
Again, use what they had.
was their most common source. I'll bring it in closer. And as I do, I'm just going to tell you all this is not real, but you know what I'm holding, right? The cow wapoopy. Cow poop was the number one fuel
Source.
source that they had. The kids were responsible for collecting it. They did use other things too, but you can see this very happy mom right here.
She has got her a wagon full.
Yes, she does. She is ready to go home and cook supper. But, you know, Mary, I always worried about what it would smell like.
Yeah, it's
And-
just not something you think would.
Yeah.
It's not like your Scentsies burning or
Yeah,
anything like that today.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. Oh, to cow poop. I
No,
don't think so.
no.
But since cow poop is really just digested grass, there's not a foul odor. In fact, from what I understand, it doesn't even there's no odor at all that comes off of it when you burn it. So,
Which is amazing because you can smell it.
yeah, you can smell it, but after it dries,
Right.
you know. So the lesson here is only pick up the dry poop.
If you learn anything from today's lesson,
That's
only
it.
dry poop.
Yeah,
people.
only pick it up to burn the dry poop. But they did use, you know, there was some stalks from plants, things like that could burn a little slower. But, you know, the grass and the leaves or whatever, those are going to just burn so fast that
right.
it's not going to be helpful at all. The video talked about some unwanted house guests that they might have. And
all of those are unwanted.
yeah, our friend Nathan Mackey might disagree where the snake is, but I don't.
Sorry,
yeah.
Nathan.
I'm
I
not
don't
on
wanna
board
live
yet,
with 'em.
man. I'm not on board.
Nope.
But, you know, one of the reasons that these were such problems was, well, the walls were made of sod. You know, that's where these bugs live.
Yeah.
Another reason is because they didn't have tight-fitting hinged doors that sealed around the edges. So, of course, you're going to get critters that come in. The video talked about the temperature inside the house being cool in the summer and warm in the winter. It didn't change. The beauty of the sod house is that the walls were so thick, they just acted like insulation that kept the temperature comfortable year-round.
Right.
So there wasn't that up and down temperature that went along with whatever was going on outside. It was
It
just,
was a constant.
yeah, it was a constant, comfortable temperature. So that was a real plus for them. But it still, all of these things allowed, or probably even
Invited.
yeah, that's the word, invited these unwanted house guests
Yeah.
in. And if you're sleeping on the floor, you know,
You might get a bed
yeah,
buddy.
yeah. Now, these houses had dirt floors to begin with, but when they would clear off the place to build the house, they would try to level it as much as possible. They might wet it down a little bit, walk around on it, but within a month of living in a sod house, the floor would be so packed that you could sweep crumbs off of it if, you know,
That
crumbs
amazes
fell
me.
from a meal. I know. Yeah, so it wasn't like a dusty kind of,
Constantly
yeah,
stirred up.
yeah. But when you add a wooden floor, you're going to have a space between the dirt and the wood, and that's where all these critters are going to live, and that's why they're
Come
going
out
to,
and say hi.
yeah, they're going to come pay you a little visit at night,
Yeah.
most likely. And of course, you know, Christmas time, I mean, there are cedar trees around here, but like that picture, that first picture we showed, there were no trees anywhere. So a Christmas tree might look like just any old thing you could find. And you know how people would decorate with popcorn and berries and things like that. So it was a very simple time and a very uncluttered kind of life that they had. In fact,
Unmaterialistic.
yeah, that's a good word. Just thinking about uncluttered, it made me think about like the furnishings in a sod house. You know, it's just
Space
gonna,
is a commodity, so
Yeah.
you
yeah,
whatever you did take up space usually had or had a reason, and it was a pretty important reason.
right. And things that you didn't use all the time, like sewing machines or tubs or crocks, things like that. Those would actually stay outside unless the weather might damage them because there wasn't enough space inside.
Right.
So, you know, you might have to blow the dirt out of the sewing machine before you use it. But that, I mean, that really was, that was just their lives. If they had something special, a piece of heirloom furniture or maybe a lace curtain, something really precious to them that they
That would
brought
take
with them.
space.
Yeah, they would make sure that they had space for something like that. So in, you know, as far as the jobs the kid had, the picking up poop was one of the kids' jobs, you know.
Yep.
So kids who complain about having to clean up after your dogs, what if you had to go gather up a bunch of cow poop? Yeah. So, but they didn't have the wood to build corrals. So if they had any livestock, which typically would have been one cow, one horse, a mule, I don't know, something like that. They just let them roam, and so the kids had to make sure that they didn't roam too far away, because that absolutely was a thing that would happen sometimes. And then we also talked about the cattle drives. The cattle drive, I guess we didn't mention that, did we? So the cattle drives were actually going through this part of the country about the same time people were moving here. And so, you know, cow poop was like everywhere. So
it was not hard to find.
Yeah, that was one reason it was so plentiful. But the cattle drives did kind of give a little issue to the settlers, because if they had a cow, that cow might kind of
Start following the other ones.
yeah, maybe see a handsome bull in the herd and decide to follow. I don't know
Yeah.
what might motivate that. But then the other side of it was if a cow had a calf, then sometimes the cowboys would just choose to leave them behind because of choosing between a big delay in arriving in Abilene versus giving up a couple of cows.
Yeah.
They were more than willing to give up a couple of cows. So that was a thing that actually happened. So here's a picture. I loved this one. So they built this big, nice frame house right next to their sod house. So this is just to show, this is what they waited to build. This is what they
We're living in.
were
at one
living
point.
in. Yeah. And this is a really good example. I'm going to show you some other sod house pictures. But in those days, photographers would travel through and make an appointment with someone, say, you know, we'll be back on this day to take a picture of your family if you'd like. And so they would tell them, you know, sure. And when they would come through, everyone would be in their best clothes. They would have items that they owned.
Their prized possessions.
Yeah, out in front with them. And if, like, they've got this buggy and a horse out here, it was important to them that their pictures reflected a certain level of, like, social
Standing.
yeah. And so they were always trying to add things to their picture so that it would give the appearance that they owned plenty, I guess would be the word
That they
for
were
it.
well off.
Wasn't like a
or-
lot, yeah. So, but this roof, it looks like it's a sod roof.
A window.
Couple of windows, a door, and I did. Sometimes ladies would take flower seeds and toss them up on the roof, and
So
then
give it
some,
a
a little flower garden would grow up there on the roof of the house.
Feminine touch there
That
on the
seems
roof.
like a little kind of a fairy tale kind of thing or something, doesn't it?
Snow White Cottage.
Yeah. So, but anyway, this is a really good picture to show how they would keep their sod house. Here again, this is a sod house built into the side of a hill. The cow's on the hill, not on the roof. These are not that sturdy. But you can see everyone's in their best clothes. They've got their horses. This sod house was built by someone who knew what they were doing.
Yeah, it's look how straight the roof is.
Yeah. And it has two
And
doors.
the windows are framed out nice.
Yeah, the windows were the most expensive part.
So the picture was definitely taken on the side of the windows.
Yes, yeah, for sure. And then, you know, we don't know if these are their animals or their neighbors' animals, because sometimes they would borrow from their neighbors just to make sure they had some in their picture.
Some in there.
Yeah. So there was let's see, at the beginning of the 21st century, which is the century we're in now, right? Yeah. I always lose track of that. The numbers don't match. Don't laugh at me. Okay. There was a sod house museum in Alfalfa County, Oklahoma, 4 miles north of Clio Springs. And there's a sod house there that's on the National Register of Historic Places. It was put there in 1970. So it wasn't even put on the register till 1970. It was already almost 100 years old.
Man.
Yeah. So I was going to make sure that I didn't miss any of this. So winters used to be
Brutal.
terrible out here. And there was one especially harsh winter in 1886. I don't know why I'm telling this story, but I just think it's
I
interesting.
remember reading about it though.
Cows and horses, their breath would freeze over their mouths and
yeah.
noses, and they died because they couldn't breathe.
How cold is that?
Yeah,
That's just
just the little bit of moisture in their breath froze and probably eventually just
Made it-
closed off where they couldn't breathe, and they lost a lot of livestock that winter. That's just a terrible, harsh winter. We don't have any idea. But no matter how hard it was, the weather, grasshoppers, blizzards, tornadoes, all these things, wildfires.
right.
People still were so drawn
To
to
this area.
the land and to the wildlife and just the abundance of all of that. Now, settling this area fell under the Homestead Act.
Mm-hmm.
And according to the Homestead Act, people could claim a section of land, 160 acres, but they committed to building something on it within 6 months,
Making improvements.
making improvements on it, and then within 5 years, if they stayed on it and continued to improve it, it would be theirs, free.
Mm-hmm. Free and clear.
Free, but they had to make that commitment, and more than 50% of the people who came out here and tried to do that
Mm-hmm.
gave up and either went back where they had lived before or tried to go further west. So not for the faint of heart.
It wasn't right. It wasn't easy to do.
Yeah, thank you to those of you who stuck it out,
You
because
have to be willing.
that's why we're still here, is because you were willing to. Oh, Nebraska marble. They called the sod bricks Nebraska marble. That was a joke. Nope, no making fun of Nebraska. I'm just sharing the information that I found about this stuff. So each of the bricks that they cut weighed about 50 pounds.
That's heavy.
About 50
About
pounds.
4
of-
into it, I'd be done for the day.
Yeah, and it took about 3,000 of them to build that 16 by 18 to 20 foot house with a 7.5 foot wall. So this was a job that could take months.
Mm-hmm.
It could take a very long time.
All hands on deck.
Especially imagine if it was a drought time.
Oh, yeah.
How
That dirt
dry the
dried
dirt
out.
would be. You couldn't build a sod house that would stay up.
Mm-mm.
And you know how today the houses, our walls are built straight, and then we use the roof to get water to run off and to keep it. Okay, so the sod houses were actually wider at the bottom and narrower at the top.
Okay.
They made the base of the walls wider and then kind of narrowed them up to make them more uniform going up, because that is the way the sod could stay more sturdy and allow for runoff.
The runoff.
Yeah, because you still have to have the runoff no matter what. So, let's see, making sure I don't miss anything. I told you about that part. So, I've got a few more interesting sod house pictures to share with you. Again, I want you to notice this roof line, especially when I show you this next one. Look at that roof line right there. Okay, this would be the house I build. The other one would be the one my husband Kevin builds. Okay. Now I'm not going to put this dad down.
No, he did the best
He
could.
did the best he could. This is something that I always like to.
His kids are clothed. He's got some animals.
Right. But this is something that I think is important for us to acknowledge, is that everyone had to build a house, but not everyone knew how to build a house or had that everybody's different, and so some of us are really good at some things and some are good at other things. And if you didn't have neighbors or someone who could come and help you, it would take you way longer to build your house, and your house roof line might look a little more like this than the other people's house in the picture before. But you can see this piece of fabric right here. That's probably what they used as a door. That's just, kind of what they did. This is my favorite. I call it the open air design. I don't know why.
Open concept.
There is no outside wall on this house. This is a load of sod. This is very typical how they would cut it, load it on a wagon, and haul it to where they were going to use it. I mean, remember, each of those bricks weighs 50 pounds. And if they didn't have a wagon, they would fashion a sled of some kind, because there's just no way you could pick up 50 pounds and carry it over. I mean, an acre of land,
Right.
that's a lot of area to cover.
trips.
But you see their table and chairs are right here on the outside. So you can also see how they would lay the bricks, lay some one way and then come back and lay some the other way, so they crisscrossed each other, and just to make a stronger wall. And then this is the final picture. Oklahoma dugout, number 34. That's how the photographer would keep track of where these pictures were to be delivered. These people really broke out their Sunday best.
Yes, they did.
I mean, they are dressed to the nines here.
They've got all of their buckets out
Yeah,
here.
all of their items from inside the
Mhm.
house that they could pull out. 2 buggies, not one, but 2.
A cow.
A cow with a bridle on it.
Mhm.
So you know Bessie, she's pretty gentle.
Yeah.
And anyway, they have a lot of things in this picture, but you can tell that this is, we always talk about how this looks like a storm shelter. This is probably the house the neighborhood ran to when they could see a tornado
Right.
coming. Because I guarantee you could see one coming for a ways.
Exactly.
And so this is just another example of a dugout. One thing people would do is they would decorate the walls if they didn't use like a
The newspaper and
wallpaper.
things.
Yeah, they might hang quilts on a wall for decoration. They made use of all the things that they could think of to bring with them. They did the whole bathing in a tub next to the stove. It was just a time where water was not plentiful
No,
either. The
no.
plains do not have a lot of sources of water.
No.
So if you didn't happen to build near a stream, you better hope you can dig down and find some water
somewhere.
and make a well. The whole no indoor plumbing thing. So
Buckets.
yeah, your basic indoor toilet.
Indoor, outdoor.
Yeah.
Travels well.
And then the outhouse that was out a ways from the house.
Mm-hmm.
Just so many things that we take for granted, and I think that's one reason it's important for us to look back and see how the people who settled this
Our
land,
pioneers.
the pioneers who came here, who left everything behind for this grand adventure, and they stayed and they built. They endured, they invested, they committed, and because of that, we have this great place to live. So thank you, pioneers. Thank you, early settlers. Thank you, sod busters, for coming out here and getting Oklahoma and all of this area, the whole Great Plains, kind of getting us going.
Mm-hmm.
So if you guys have questions or anything else you might want to know about a sod house, send us a message. We'd love
Try to answer it for you.
answer that for you. Be sure and tune. No trail talk tomorrow. We've kind of had to set that aside because of a little COVID-related issue. But we plan to be back next week with 2 episodes. We're going to talk about Oklahoma State symbols on Wednesday. And then we have special guest, Jilly Jones.
Oh, yes.
Jilly Jones is going to be here on
Clancy's
Thursday.
wife.
Yeah, Clancy was here a few weeks ago. Well, Jilly's going to come next week and share some of
Excited.
her photography and some of her cool stuff with us. So, thanks for watching today, guys. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Next week.
Yeah, and so until then, happy
Happy
trails.
trails.
Bye.